Welcome, everybody, to the Spend Life Well show, where we apply biblical wisdom to your financial life, helping you align your values with your wealth. I'm Certified Kingdom Advisor Mark Trice. Here in the podcast studio today, I am joined by a very special guest, one of the top employees at ClearVista Financial, our marketing manager, Katy Durham. Katy, welcome to the Spend Life Well show. Now, we've invited you to the show today because we're going to talk about millennials and Gen Zers, and why they feel or seem so far behind where the previous generation, Gen X, was so far ahead at this time in their life. And this is not an episode to bash Gen Z or the millennials or anything at all. No, it's just really having a conversation about how tough it is today for young people to get ahead, and in the same way that maybe the baby boomers and Gen X did years before. So I'll start with this, Katy. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal just this week that I was reading, and it was talking about how 55% of Gen Zers that are under the age of 39 have moved back home with mom. 55% of Gen Zers have moved back home with mom. Why do you think that is?
Well, I'm not one of those.
Yes, you do live independently. You have your own place. You pay your own bills. But a lot of Gen Zers are experiencing that. And is it harder today to establish a good financial footing than it was a few years ago or a decade ago?
I mean, seems like it. Because I think about like what my parents bought a house for when they were my age.
Gen Zers are having to spend a higher proportion of their income on housing.
Yes.
Okay. So we're going to break this down today, and we're going to kind of address the old rules, if you will, for following to develop a financial future. We're going to break them apart. Okay. The first one is about buying a house. All right. But can I share today's Bible verse with our listeners today? It comes from Proverbs 24, 3 and 4. By wisdom a house is built, and by understanding it is established. And by knowledge the rooms are filled with all the precious and pleasant riches. Financial success doesn't come from following old rules blindly. It comes from applying biblical wisdom to the circumstances that you're actually in. So we're gonna talk about 4 or 5 different. I'm gonna not say that they're myths, but we're going to talk about 4 or 5 principles that have been followed in the past for the rules that have been given to previous generations about how to build a good, solid financial future. The first one is to buy a house as soon as possible. Is that in your plan, Katy, someday to buy a house?
I think that's something that like everybody wants. It just seems, like we talked about, seems like it's taking longer than it has taken in previous generations for a lot of people my age to get there, especially if like you're not married, doing it by yourself, not having a dual income.
Yeah, that's true. Previous generations may be married younger than Gen Z or the millennial generation. Some of them are choosing not to get married at all. Many of them are choosing not to have children, which is affecting our demographic in the United States. And so people are looking at this, and the dynamic of the family has changed such that it takes longer to be able to afford a house. So you're renting right now, right?
Yes.
Okay. But that you're renting within your means, and that's something that's important for you to do. But I think there's some questions that we can ask ourselves when it comes to home ownership. One is, can I confidently afford the monthly payment? A lot of people don't think about that much. They think about, can I make this fit within my spending plan right now? But they forget all the incidental things that happen with home ownership, like taxes and repairs and things of that nature. So I think that's an important question to ask is, can I comfortably afford the monthly payment? What a lot of people will find, especially when interest rates are a little lower, is they find that buying sometimes can be cheaper than renting, depending on where you live and the market that you live in and things like that. So the next question that I have to ask, and I'm going to ask you this question, Katy, because I know the answer. Katy, do you have an emergency fund?
I do have an
Excellent,
emergency fund.
excellent. High five for Katy over here. She is a great person and a wonderful human being. So if you're watching and you want to get Katy's number, call me and I'll screen you first, and we'll make sure that you meet the criteria for getting to meet Katy. So you have an emergency fund. That's great. Do you mind sharing what your emergency fund is? I mean, not the number, but like, is it like a... Katy lives at this address and keeps all her money in a basket under her bed. No,
Not true.
but as a how many months of living expenses should you keep in an emergency fund? What have you decided to do?
I think the rule is at least 3. I have at least 6.
Okay, good. So that's a great place to start. You've accomplished one of the steps towards home ownership with that. I don't recommend people buying a home if they don't have an emergency fund, because guess what? You're going to have stuff happen. Stuff will break down. And if you don't have an emergency fund, you can't deal with that. Another question that we often need to ask ourselves and consider is, how long are we likely to stay in that home? I mean, if this is a 2-year stint, that's probably a pretty risky situation to buy a home, especially if you're not going to be staying in that geographic market, right? And you plan to stay here at this job forever. Is that correct? That's right.
Forever and ever.
So if you're not going to stay in the home for several years, you probably don't need to be buying a home. Don't do like in the mid-2000s where people were buying multiple homes just hoping that they would appreciate and that they would sell them for a profit. And we saw what happened in the 08, 09 financial crisis, where people lost lots of homes. They had lots of foreclosures around the country. So you want to make sure you're going to stay there you really only need one, especially when you're starting out. It's great if you someday have 2 or more, but most of us in our lifetimes will have 1. And then another question will be, will owning limit your ability to pursue other career opportunities? And this is something to really think about. A lot of people don't talk about this too much. And I'm happy, because you are very talented and someone could snatch you up at any moment and offer you lots of money and whisk you away to another city. So is owning the best option in that situation? Because it sometimes will limit your ability to accept that job or consider that job if you're concerned about having 2 houses. The old goal that we were taught was to buy quickly, right? The new goal should be, and this is not the new goal. This is really the basic foundation for biblical wisdom, is buy when you're financially prepared. So you're wanting a house someday, and I think Katy is taking the steps to prepare for that. And that is just solid biblical wisdom.
So we talked about like an emergency fund, and that's one of the steps that you need to have in order to buy a home and be like financially responsible when you're buying.
Yes.
What are some of the other things that you need to have in place before you decide, oh, I'm ready to buy a home?
Well, I think a steady income. Gone are the days where we could have a no income type financing, which is really stupid. But a lot of people were getting home loans with no income whatsoever. So I think you need to have a steady income. I think your monthly income needs to be greater than your mortgage payment. So really the general rule is between 30 to 32% is the most you want to take on in a mortgage payment. I know folks like Dave Ramsey say no more than a quarter, like 25% of your monthly income can go towards a mortgage. And that's a good rule for renting too, but you need to have those things in place. But the big ones are emergency fund. a sizable down payment. I think 20% is reasonable. Not many of us are going to be ever able to just pay cash for our home. So financing's probably involved. But you got to have a good credit rating too in order to qualify. So emergency fund, a good down payment, reasonable expectations of what you can actually afford, because there are lenders that will let you afford everything. Okay? We don't want that. You want to be prudent to make sure that you are buying wisely. But I think once you do those, you've got the green light. Another rule that's out there is staying with one company your entire career. I think it's a great one, Katy, that you should stay with one company your entire career. I'm being facetious here because we love Katy and we want her to stay here forever. But previous generations, you hear of situations where people work at one company for 40 or 50 years. I don't think that's the norm now. I think there's a lot of strategic career changes that we see. I know a lot of, we see people jumping careers in different companies quite often. Sometimes they're for good reasons, because it's a strategic move. They're getting more responsibility and maybe more income. But a lot of times they're just jumping because they're either bored or they can't do the job that's needed to be done there. So they want to get out of the situation. But when you make strategic career changes, it often can lead to more income, better benefits, greater flexibility with what you do with your time, and improved work-life balance. I will say this, loyalty is important. Loyalty to a company is important. And I don't mean that loyalty that means that you stay for some place for 50 years. It means that when you are at an employer, that you're giving it your all, your full attention, 110%. We've had people pass through these doors that didn't stay very long because as soon as they showed up on day one, they were searching the resume, searching for job openings that would pay them some more. And quite frankly, I've been guilty of that in my career. Not on day one, but I've been guilty of that, to go from one job to the next because it paid more. And sometimes it wasn't the right fit. I got paid more, but I was miserable.
Not worth it.
Yeah. You're just in between. You're right in the middle between millennials and Gen Z. What do your peers, your friends of your generation say about careers in general?
I think that, at least what I'm hearing from the people I'm surrounded with, is we would like, a job that we care about, that we're passionate about. But we don't want it to be our whole lives. So while we're there at our job, we would give it 110%. And then we're able to have a life outside of the job as well.
No, that's exactly what it is. Give it, but it's what I was saying earlier. Give it 110% while you're on the job. And then yes, have some balance in your life. You've got your friends, your church, family, cats, pets or things like that. Those are all important, but giving it your all when you're here. I'm kind of envious of you and your generation in some ways because, I've been an entrepreneur all my life, and I have worked jobs before, but I never was able to disconnect properly so that I didn't bring my job home with me or on vacation and things like that. So I applaud, millennials and Gen Z for looking for not work-life balance, because I think that's a misnomer, but for having other priorities when they're done with work. You know what I'm saying? And I think your generation does a good job of that. Point number 3 was avoid all debt. That's the old rule. And it's a good rule because Proverbs says that the borrower is slave to the lender. And I think the Bible gives us a warning about debt. But and debt certainly deserves respect, but not all debt serves the same purpose. So, what might be an example of something that a millennial or Gen Z might use debt for?
Things that come to mind, like we've already talked about, would be home purchase.
Okay.
Maybe a car.
Okay.
Maybe not the shiniest, fanciest, newest car, but
Okay.
a practical car.
A practical car. Oh, that's a good way to put it. A practical car. Yes.
A practical car. There might be some student loan debt that they have. I don't know.
So is student loan debt okay?
I mean, I don't know. Is it?
Well, I think it's being used for a greater purpose. It's important probably not to take on too much student loan debt because we have people that are retired and they have student loan debt, and I'm like, okay, what's going on here? That's not a time to have student loan debt when you're retired. So you don't want to be paying for it for the next 50 years. But I think a rule of thumb for student loan debt is, as I was always told, don't take out more debt than your first year's salary that you're going to potentially make after graduating. So that dollar figure is going to vary, right? If you're thinking about becoming an educator, all right, or a school teacher. I don't know what school teachers' starting salaries are. I know when I was a public educator, my starting salary for a first year of teaching was $18,500 a year. Okay, and even though it was a long time ago, it was really hard to pay the bills on $18,500 a year. But that if I followed that rule of thumb, then I shouldn't have borrowed more than $18,500 in loans for student or education purposes. I borrowed much, much more than that. So, okay, so that's one good use of debt, buying a car, maybe buying a house. Any others? What about credit cards? And can we pay for things we don't have money for?
I was raised to not carry a credit card balance every month.
Your parents must have been really weird. No, I think I applaud that. That's wonderful that you were taught those principles for that. Yes, having debt never really got us ahead, okay? And certainly having revolving debt, like a credit card, doesn't help you get ahead. So I applaud you. You pay off your credit card bills every month. You don't let them linger, and that keeps you ahead because debt can weigh you down. I mean, think of opportunities that might pop up, and if you've got debt and you can't afford to take a short-term pay cut for this wonderful opportunity, you can't do it. And so making sure that we're avoiding the bad kind of debt, it's okay to have some of the okay debt. I'll never say any debt's good debt, but that's a good rule of follow. So not all debt is good debt. Not all debt is bad debt. You have to make sure that you are finding that balance for only borrowing for things that will enable you to do something greater, like education. Or, if you need a car to drive to work, although someone like Dave Ramsey will say, just buy a beater for $2,000, but it'll get you to work once. After that, I don't know. But give your mom and dad kudos for teaching you those good principles about not carrying debt as little as you possibly can. Rule number 4, the rule of save 10% and you'll be fine. You'll be okay. Saving is important, right? It's a good habit, right? But the rule of saving 10% is a little arbitrary. I don't know how much you save. I think having a fixed percentage is not necessarily enough for everybody because some people may have greater spending habits than others. And if you continue those spending habits in the future, you're going to need more to live off of. I think you should get on some type of forced savings plan so that you're making sure that you're paying yourself first, right? Or tithing first, paying yourself second, and then living off the rest. I think it's important to save like that. So I assume that you've begun to invest in different ways. Do you participate in your workplace retirement plan?
I do participate in my
That
workplace
is awesome.
retirement
I already knew
plan.
the answer to that question. But you've got to save in proportion to your goals, right? So if you're quickly trying to get to a point of being able to put a down payment on a house, that's a short-term goal, and you want to do that aggressively, hopefully. But if you don't have goals for things to save for, you won't do it.
You'll just spend it. If you don't have like
Of
a
course.
purpose, you'll just, oh, I would like this thing. I'm going to go ahead and buy that because
Right.
there's nothing else that money is going to at the moment.
Yes, that's why it's so important to have goals, whether it's retirement. And I know it's real hard. Folks, I know it's real hard when you're 20-something or in your mid-20s and you're thinking about retirement. It's like, that's 40 years from now. That's double of the years that I've actually lived. It'll never get here. I mean, I had the same attitude. When I was in my 20s, I was pretty sure that I was going to die in my 40s. Okay, because just family history and stuff, and one of my aunts convinced me that I was going to die in my 40s. And she's still around, I'm still around, and I remind her of that all the time. So you've got to have goals. You got to have long-term goals. You got to have midterm goals and short-term goals. Okay, so it's important that you're saving for these purposes. How do you set aside different categories or something to try to save for that goal? Do you do it that way? How do you do that?
I probably should. Like I said, I just spend as little as possible.
Okay. All right. That's wise. For some folks, for some households, 10% could be enough, but it might not be enough. You know, one of the metrics or the kind of rules of thumb as people get closer to retirement and us trying to figure out how much they need to retire, we look at what they're spending now. And if their spending is high, their retirement income needs will be high as well. And people is like, oh, well, I won't, you know, pick your poison of what you're not going to do. But we don't change behaviors very often.
Gotten used to a certain lifestyle.
Yeah. Our fifth point that a lot of people do is stop waiting for perfect financial condition. They hold out on setting goals and preparing for the future or making a major purchase because the right conditions are not there. Maybe we're holding out for lower mortgage rates, right? Interest rates, the ideal investments markets, waiting for every debt to disappear. I'm not saying be spendthrift and spend happy and do everything you want now, regardless of the consequences in the situation. But I think that rarely do we see perfect conditions arrive. I know, and I have permission to talk about this, but when my wife and I, Holly and I, decided to we were thinking about a family, and we had been married for like 10 years. But we were waiting for the perfect ideal situation for us to start having a family. And now, you know, I've got some out the door and I got some still at home. And I'm 55 and one of my goals when I was 22 was to retire about 10 years ago. So that hasn't happened because we had a family, but those are all wonderful things. But I think there's never a perfect time for those things. Are you waiting for the perfect opportunity for certain things, like maybe buying a house?
Maybe. I mean, I don't
Subconsciously,
know.
are you doing that?
Subconsciously.
Okay. Well, I think, you know, the traditional rules, I'm not saying that they don't apply at all anymore. I'm saying that we need to look at them differently. And so I think the principles that we really need to focus on, because these are all rules that are put out there in public and the media talks about and stuff, but the principles that we really need to talk about never change. And they're the principles that come from Scripture and how we're supposed to organize our financial lives. One is spend less than you earn. It's a novel concept, but we break that principle all the time because we want what we want now and we don't want to wait. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, especially like we're talking about my generation. I think with social media and comparison, it's like you can see what everybody else has.
Oh yeah, and most of
like,
it's fake anyway.
Yes, and so you're like, I want that too, and so it's, you know, you kind of have to check yourself and be like, oh, I don't I don't need that. I want that.
I was listening. That's a good distinction. Do I need it, or do I just want it? I mean, we're bombarded by thousands of advertising messages today, or TikTok videos galore that compare somebody else to what you have. And no, I don't have 3 Lamborghinis in my garage and a big
Really?
swimming pool. No, I don't. I know people probably think that financial advisors do, but we don't. We're normal, average people. But you spend less than you earn, and that means you also are living within your means. It's very simple concept. Do not spend more than you earn. There was an old Saturday Night Live skit with Steve Martin in it, and he was promoting his new book, or the sketch was promoting the new book. Steve Martin was the clueless guy, and it was like they're lamenting over all the bills and things like that. And then the spokesperson came out and said, "I've got this new book here, and it'll help solve all your problems." And the title of it was, "Do not buy stuff you cannot afford." And they went through this dialogue. It was funny, right? But it was funny for a reason, because we all know that we should not buy stuff we do not have money for. And yet we live in a society where it encourages us to create or rack up debt so that we can have those things that we want right now. And I applaud you, and I hope all millennials and Gen Zers are doing the same thing. They're not putting a bunch of stuff on credit cards. They're spending what they have. They're living within their means. They're saving consistently. They're investing for the long term, okay? They're avoiding unnecessary debt. And they make decisions with purpose instead of comparison. I think you're on the right track. Okay, I think you're on the right track, because you have a purpose for what you're saving your money for. You are not spending without consideration. You're living within your means. So the key takeaways here: traditional financial advice should be evaluated rather than accepted blindly. Right. So the old rules are hurry up, buy a house. Save for the future, save 10% for the future. It's okay to go into debt if you have to for all these different things. That's not necessarily the way to do it. I think your generation is probably in some ways more wiser than previous generations, except for all the TikTok advice. I'm sorry. There's so many TikTok influencers out there, and quite frankly, I know I shouldn't say this on a Christian program, but they're stupid. They're saying things that don't matter, and the Bible gives us instruction on how to handle our financial lives. There's over 2,300 verses in the Bible dealing with wealth and possessions. So I encourage you to look at that stuff. Don't accept the old rules, but make sure that you are making decisions based in wisdom that can be found in the counsel of others in your life group, in your church, in the Bible. And make sure that you are consulting those trusted folks so that you are making wise decisions. And Katy, I really do think that you are an example of what your generation should be doing with their finances. And folks, you can always contact us with your questions. This topic came up because somebody sent in a question, was asking about this, because it's like, woe is me, the Millennials, Gen Z, we just can't make it ahead. I believe you can. First and foremost, don't live with your mom. Get an apartment, get a roommate, something. I'm serious. I mean, we make light of that sometimes, but it's like you need to cleave from mom and dad so that you can experience true independence. And sometimes if we want to have independence, we do have to rely on the wisdom of others that have gone before us. You can send us a text at 254-282-0495. Just send us a recommendation of future topics. You can visit us on our website at ClearVistaFinancial.com or send us an email at info@ClearVistaFinancial.com. Put in the comments here if you enjoy getting to visit with Katy, and give us a thumbs up. Subscribe to our channel so that you can be alerted of future videos, which we have one come out almost every week. I want to thank you for listening, Katy. Thank you for braving the cameras and the microphone to come on the show. I'm going to give you some applause for all the good things that you've been doing, and you had good teachers to teach you these
They did.
things. So I'm thankful for mom and dad in that situation. Until next time, folks, you've been listening to the Spend Life Well show.
Securities offered through Cambridge Investment Research Incorporated, a broker-dealer, member FINRA SIPC. Advisory services through Cambridge Investment Research Advisors Incorporated, a registered investment advisor. Cambridge and ClearVista Financial are not affiliated. Discussions in the show should not be construed as recommendations or investment advice. Always consult with your investment professional before making important investment decisions.